Well, hello, this is Robert Cosby, and I'm here with you for hopefully a great presentation related to social isolation and its impact on mental wellness. It is an opportunity for us to be able to discuss social isolation and its impact on mental wellness, but also to give you a bit of history, as well as to take you through some of the aspects related to this, understanding a little bit about a definition of what we mean by social isolation. And then we'll finish up with what I hope will be some solutions that will give you something that you can take in your back pocket and take forward with you when we leave. So let's get to it. I am Dr. Robert Cosby. I serve as the Assistant Dean for Administration. I'm an associate professor, but I also am the director for the Multidisciplinary Gerontology Center here at Howard University on the main campus here in Washington, D.C. Our hope is to be able to help you to understand the impact, understand some of the risk factors, recognize some of the signs and symptoms, and then strengthen support systems. And that's where I said we will have some hopeful solutions for you. I was hoping that we will have also another collaborator in this effort, Dr. Sheila Jones. She's a gerontologist and adult protective services expert. She works with the District of Columbia Department of Human Services and its Family Services Administration. So she was having a bit of technical difficulties, but we hope she'll be able to join us. You can see a little bit about my background there. Before the Multidisciplinary Gerontology Center, I've worked at the local, state, national levels, federal levels as well, and have had a lot of experience in health and human services. So let's get going. So social isolation and its impact on mental wellness. I think we'll start with understanding, I believe that understanding the impact is going to be important, but let's start with some definitions. So we have our objectives today. You'll be able to understand what is social isolation, how it's different from loneliness, demonstrate some knowledge of social isolation, the causes and the impact. We'll talk about risk factors and or your knowledge of systems that can support people's mental wellness and avoid social isolation. In this case, social isolation is not a good thing. So what is social isolation, and how can we better understand the impact of it? So in order to understand it, I think we should start with understanding a little bit about some theory. And so attachment theory is one I'll bring to your attention. For many of you, you may already know this, but let me tell you how I think it's going to be linked to social isolation. So when we talk about psychological abandonment, I believe it is related to attachment, and the feelings of being rejected, neglected, or deserted are often connected to this early childhood experience. And John Bowlby was one of the first people to kind of talk about that. But these experiences, I believe, can lead to development of insecure attachment styles. And then fears of abandonment later in life can be triggered by things associated with social isolation. Trauma can be one of those, but we'll come back to that in a little bit. So social isolation is basically something that happens where part of the brain is cut off and it's not stimulated to be able to look at a normal way in which we might want to deal with attachment. Instead, it tries to reject people on the outside, and it's done internally. And so that may happen with grief and loss, and how we see loss, and perhaps how we see hope. So definition. First, social isolation is a state of limited or absent social interactions. And I feel there are 4 of them that I'll talk to you about. So the reduced is you have a reduced social network. So because you have willfully tried to separate yourself from others, the existence of your circle of friends or acquaintances is changed. The second is that it's a state of interaction where you have less and less interaction with other people, less social contact. So there's very little face-to-face. You avoid phone calls, interactions, any online communications. You just don't want to deal with that. Next piece to that is related to social supports, and you don't have very many of those because you've tried to become more insular and to avoid being around people, and that has a problem. That can be a problem. Another is feelings of being alone, and so those experiences of detachment and isolation from social groups can be a real big problem. Social isolation can be voluntary or it can be involuntary. In the cases where it's voluntary, that's what I was talking about. An individual chooses to reduce your social interactions, and involuntarily, this can result from factors such as you're far away from the people you want to talk to, or perhaps might be interested in talking to. You don't want to do that. Health conditions, also social stigma. Those all may be related to social isolation. Social isolation can also be triggered by feelings of trauma, and those feelings can open up wounds that you may have had previously, and that may help you to feel more out of control. And that is a real big thing because in the brain, and this is just a little bit of physiology, we talk about the amygdala in the middle of the brain as controlling that flight, fight, or freeze response that we have. Back in prehistoric days, that was a very good thing to have, so that some large animal didn't try and bite you and gobble you up. So being able to fight or to fly, to get away as quickly as possible was important. And those that froze, sometimes they didn't make it. But that was historically. Now we're talking about how that affects us as we look at our feelings of trauma and what happens with social isolation. So social isolation means very often that you don't have those relationships or contacts, the things I mentioned to you before, but you'll continue to hear me continue to build. So we're building a foundation so that you understand this. And as we put the building blocks on each of these, you get to understand a little more about the impact it can have in people's lives and in the community. So we talk about this from the standpoint of loneliness is not the same as social isolation. But it's the feeling of being alone, disconnected, or not close to others. Social isolation and loneliness can be very detrimental to you, and it can put the person at risk of developing serious mental and physical health conditions as a result. So how much impact can it have? It can have the same impact as a person smoking 15 cigarettes a day. And think about that for a second. We all know that when you smoke cigarettes, you're at risk for everything from heart disease to lung disease to a variety of vascular problems, etc. And we're saying that social isolation can have the same level of impact. So we also are saying that these physiological and psychological consequences, that over the course of a lifetime, they can, in fact, shorten the lifespan. And we know that social workers, allied health providers, and physicians can recognize social isolation as a barrier to the quality of life and to longevity. A few things you should probably want to know is that social isolation is really a lack of having people around you. It's something that you've chosen to do, and it can be very detrimental. The second is related to risk factors, and so let's talk about that briefly. When I talk about risk factors, we're talking about people that live alone, people that are part of a vulnerable group, people that may not speak English, people that have, as I mentioned earlier, small social networks that are inadequate to provide the level of social support that may be necessary. And that may mean that as a result of this, that you may have psychological and cognitive vulnerabilities that I was just mentioning, and that those aren't just for the person that is directly feeling that being socially isolated. Believe it or not, it can be something happens when a person is a caregiver. Just think about that for a second. If you're a caregiver, what are you doing? You're taking care of someone else, and sometimes that can be such a difficult and consuming level of activities that your life is basically, as a caregiver, 24/7. You don't have any downtime. You're taking care of the person. You're hoping you get a chance to sleep, and that may not be enough time to sleep, particularly if you're taking care of an older person, perhaps someone that has cognitive impairment, such as with Alzheimer's disease. And so we see that there are some very difficult things that are happening. So there are maybe some major life transitions as well. There may be some mobility or sensory losses or impairment that happens. And this all can have some impact as we look at changing. And this is where we talk about a lot of minority groups, particularly Black folks, when we start to look at the issue of socioeconomic status. If you have few resources, maybe you're struggling to be able to survive where there's more month at the end of the money. And so you don't know how you're necessarily going to make it. And so you're looking at this from the standpoint of, I can't do anything with people on the outside because I can't afford to go out. And that may be something that causes depression or helps you in looking at things in a different way. I asked the question, does age matter? And the answer is, when we're talking about risk factors, yes, it does, but it also can be triggered by other things. So it's not just older people that are potentially at risk for social isolation. It has an impact on younger people as well as adults. And so I want you to think about that as we think about from the standpoint of risk factors. So we talked about the type of social impact that it has. I mentioned about the same as smoking 15 cigarettes a day, but it also can, social isolation can be a multiplier for why people get sick. It can increase or help to build on the amount of heart disease and stroke that happens with folks. And so that's a big thing that happens. Another thing that happens is the type 2 diabetes, and that is also a big issue. I mentioned depression earlier, but depression and anxiety go together, and those also can be things that are pushed along by social isolation, or in some cases, because of the depression and anxiety, they move to social isolation, not wanting to be around folks. It can also be something that pushes people to suicidality or self-harm, and so people that want to take their lives, it's not a good thing. So dementia can be another byproduct to that cognitive decline, as well as the potential for death. And so these are things that you should definitely think about. I just wanted to just share with you some of the risk factors that are here. We're talking about loss of mobility, possible loss of vision or hearing, psychological cognitive challenges we were just talking about, the feeling of lack of purpose, financial struggles I mentioned with the SES, socioeconomic status, separation from friends or family, language barriers I mentioned, major life changes such as the death of a family member. You'll be surprised at the number of people that say that they have had a person that has that was important to them that died in their life and that is no longer there, and they are struggling with what to do about that, how they are going to survive. Sometimes it's a parent that they were particularly close with, and they say, Mama and I were so close. I was her ride or die person, and now she's gone. What do I do? And they don't necessarily have a way to address their grief or their feeling of loss. And so another may be experiencing discrimination based on age, racial, ethnic background, or sexual orientation. When we talk about LGBTQ folks or others, we think that we are not trying to, but we end up pushing people further away as opposed to bringing them closer to the community. And those can be particular risk factors for social isolation. Living in a rural setting or an area that is unsafe or hard to reach neighborhoods. We've had in the last a number of years an increase in the level of violence, particularly gun violence, such that some people felt that it doesn't feel safe to go out, and so they stayed inside. They didn't want to talk to people. They were trying to get away from things that were hurting, but in addition to their trying to get away, they were actually hurting themselves. And so that inability to leave home without help because of your psychological perspective, that can create some other cognitive issues as well. Sometimes, folks say, well, I don't need to go any place, but I don't have a car or bus or train. I can't go out anyway. So lack of transportation. And so you become more and more insulated from people. And so your ability to care for a loved one who's unwell, as I mentioned, caregivers issues can be there. And those all end in pushing people to lack of social support. And, we talk about young people saying, oh, I want to be by myself. I want to have my own place. It can be good for a bit, but, we are social beings. We have to be able to have interaction. If you don't have that ability, then that can be really quite difficult for you. So let's talk about recognizing some of the signs and symptoms when we talk about what we're talking about with respect to social isolation and its impact on mental wellness. Trauma can be a trigger for social isolation. It is a trigger in part because the emotional wound that is created or was created by a particular event. It may be domestic violence. It may be gun violence that I mentioned just a few moments ago. It may be that experience that you had of that traumatic event. So, and in some cases, it's not the event that happened with you. It was the event that happened with someone else, maybe a sibling or a significant other, a family, nuclear family member or extended family member. And you feel the pain that they have or had. And as a result of that, you have this vicarious trauma that serves as a trigger for you're not wanting to be out in the community. You're not wanting to go outside. And so some of these can be auditory, they can be visual, they can be touch-centered, olfactory, meaning smell. And what can occur when those things, people say, well, I'm fine. Particularly Black males like myself may say, yeah, I'm cool, bruh. Don't need nothing. I'm good. But what they really are saying is they're not talking about what's really bothering them. And so they may become more socially isolated as a result. And they get to where they may hear something. There's maybe a car backfires and immediately they think of gunshot and they want to jump on the floor. Maybe they were in the military and they have post-traumatic stress disorder. And so they're struggling to be able to deal with those things. And so that can be a really difficult thing when we're talking about the emotional wounds that potentially can be opened again as a result of those experiences. And that trauma and losing control may be the kind of thing that leads to their social isolation where they can't be around folks. And as I mentioned, that role that the amygdala plays in the brain can be quite important here as we talk about being stimulated with that flight, fight, or freeze response. So how do we avoid social isolation? I think one of the things that we try to do is I believe we have to recognize the symptoms and we look at what are those signs, and the lack of social support or living alone are definitely things that you need to check on. And we need to look at what that means when you don't have social supports. We all think, I think at some point that when you're young, that you're invincible, that you don't need anybody if you want to. but you may have close friends, or you may not have close friends at all. And so you're thinking you can handle everything on your own. And I can tell you that for the most part, that is not true. But those are things that we work towards. This particular picture isn't just a picture to sort of break up the slides. It's to say that you may see the world differently. You may feel the world differently because of social isolation. And as a result, it doesn't discriminate based on your race or ethnicity. It can affect everyone, and it can affect older people and younger people. And so you need to recognize that these are, in fact, very important issues to consider. So how common is our lack of social connection? And so I said that we are social beings earlier. And so when you feel lonely, there's data that shows that this particular slide comes from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and about 1 in 3 adults in the US feel lonely. 1 in 3. And about 1 in 4 adults in the US lack social and or emotional support. They may be people with disabilities. They may be people with different ways of looking at the world. They may be neurodivergent folks. They may be people with autism. They may be people with inability to be able to interact with folks because they can't speak the language. And all of the pieces that I talked about in that table earlier, those are all things that we need to think about as they impact community. So what do we mean when we talk about being able to strengthen support systems? Well, I think we're talking about being able to look at ways that we can avoid social isolation and its impact on both our psychological as well as our physiological wellness. And so we talk about what may be cultural impact and the dynamics within that. So something that they've come to understand is that among people of color, particularly African Americans, Black folk, we recognize that they may be more at risk for social isolation than other groups. Yes, social isolation can affect lots of different groups, but there are things that seem to have a deleterious impact, like I mentioned, aggressions, microaggressions, like stress. And so average day for many people, African Americans, there's lots of stressors. There's stressors in walking down the street. There's stressors in aging while Black. There are stressors in aging while driving the car as a result. And you have people do things that you would not have thought of, and you find that you are feeling very aggressive because of things that have happened to you. There are folks, because you're economically isolated, you have not been able to relate or interact with people in that positive way. And as I mentioned, LGBTQ folks, you may in fact have some issues that are important that are not being embraced by other groups. And you see these significant issues that are happening to you because of your sexual preference, because of your identity. And so you're having to compensate for those things because you're being left out, or because you're being ridiculed, or because you are unable to interact in the same way as other folks. And so they become big issues. And so the cultural impact and dynamics when we talk about social isolation can in fact be very, very difficult for people to address. And so we can see that some feel that they're in control of their emotions, but that may be only on the surface. They may have impacts and have certain dynamics that affect them that other folks know nothing about. I'm always reminded of how people look at the issue of whether they feel like they are part of a community. And you say, well, the person next door, we grew up together, we have everything in common, or so we thought. But then you see that there is a major schism in terms of how you see things, maybe related to your politics, or maybe related to your ideas of what should happen with children, that they should be seen but not heard, or things that you think of with corporal punishment, or ideas with older persons and being able to be independent. And they're saying, well, they just need to go to the nursing home. Well, we don't do that as a matter of fact. It is a decision that should be based upon self-determination and what the person wants. There are also opportunities where people don't necessarily know or have their best self-interest at heart because they think they can do things that maybe they cannot. But that's for a different discussion. But I put it into the context of social isolation because we do see things that bring people to where they are more at risk than they might otherwise be. So how do we address this from the standpoint of recognizing that we are going to have to live together with others, or we're going to have to live together at some point in our life experiences with others, or that we're going to be independent and on our own because we have some protective factors that have been able to help us. And so, for example, this issue of loss that I talked about just a little while ago related to grief and what that means, we may have a very difficult experience or expression when we talk about how we're going to address loss and what may be the triggering responses associated with that. And I mentioned trauma as potentially one, disengagement from others as part of that leads up to social isolation. And so when we think about this, we think of the way in which we look at hope. Hope, may be related to religious or spiritual faith. Hope may be, as President Obama said, the audacity of hope, the audacity to be able to consider things that otherwise would not be recognized. But we have, because of hope, we've been able to look at the world in a different way. But losses sometimes, because they have happened, they seem to shroud that ability to be able to look at how we deal with social isolation. And so having hope may make it very possible to not to see social isolation as something that can be addressed, because you are you have social isolation in your life experience doesn't mean you always have to have it. There are ways to work independently and with others to be able to create different responses to what may be loss, and hope is one of those. Another is being able to build support networks related to that. And that may mean having a sense of where you have been able to, I got a group of people and they all see me. We go for coffee and everybody talks about how they're doing and how maybe their family's doing, or what thing they were able to look at, if they were watching something that was on the streaming that they were able to go in their computer and look at, or maybe they don't have access to a computer. And so what they're interested in is maybe storytelling or just hearing from people and being able to connect with someone so that they feel that sense of connection. And maybe going at that same time every day gives them a sense of purpose. So they know they're going to meet their friends at the coffee house at so-and-so time, or they're going to the senior center because they have programs, or the senior wellness program. You notice I said senior a lot. Well, that's because I work with older persons, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about why I think this is an important piece in just a little bit. But these religious and ritual connections are important for helping people to understand what is important in their life experience and how they might be able to look at that. There may be links as we talk about this issue with animals. When we talk about service animals like service dogs, and we now talk about animals that aren't just dogs that that can work with folks. I was speaking with Dr. Jones recently and asking her about some of the things that they do in the District of Columbia. And I don't know if she's been able to join us, but one of the things that she was talking about was what is allowed in terms of whether people can have service animals at shelters or in temporary housing. And they said they can have dogs and they can have miniature horses. And I'm like, miniature horses? Really? And then I'm thinking, that animal must eat a lot of food. And how is it that that's okay, but having a cat or having a hamster or a rabbit or other things might not be as good? And then I started to think about it some. And I said, well, it's the connection with the animal that may help them to be able to become better regulated. And so their blood pressure goes down. They don't feel the same level of dread that may be surrounding them previously. And so these are protective factors that may be helpful to them. So how do we address these things? I think we do it from the standpoint of solutions. And this is where I said we would come back to talking about this. Here in Washington at the Multidisciplinary Gerontology Center here at Howard University School of Social Work, here on the campus at Howard University, we talk about increasing shared experiences. And the MGC, Multidisciplinary Gerontology Center, that's what the MGC stands for. We're working on several intergenerational programs and solutions to how we can better connect with people, whether they be older persons or youth. And I've taken the position that from an intergenerational standpoint, that we can do more things to help people avoid social isolation. Some of our research has been working with grand families. These are grandparents that are raising grandkids as the primary custodian for them. We are doing that with both storytelling that older persons or younger persons can do, and we're doing that both in person as well as digitally, because we recognize that not everyone can get out. But we found during COVID, that during the COVID-19 pandemic, that one of the things that was particularly difficult for people was being able to connect with folks that were not in their immediate sphere. And so we had a lot of people that died, a lot of people that ended up going to the hospital and getting sicker before they got better. I'm talking about before there was a vaccine. And that we're talking about how people were able to relate to other folks. And we didn't look at the treatment from a medical standpoint directly. We looked at it from a more holistic perspective of how can you connect people with others? How can you help them to be able to understand, to talk about things from a mentor perspective, to talk about, about storytelling from that standpoint, finding out some of the history of what happened in communities. I had a great interaction with some older people talking about their music experiences. And one of the people that I spoke to said that they used to be a trombone player. And I said, oh, I know about the trombone. I played that for a little while. And he kind of looked at me and he said, well, did you play in a band? And I said, well, for a little while at school, but that was middle school. And he kind of didn't say anything. And I said, well, did you play? And he said, yeah, I played with Duke Ellington. I said, what? You said Duke Ellington? He said, yeah. I sat on the end of the group, and I sat in one corner. But yeah, we did this and we did that. And I said, that's a great story. Did you want to tell some other people about that story? I said, well, what's to tell? I said, well, just explain what you did and who were some of the people that you played for, and where did you play when you traveled, and how did some of those experiences affect you or affect the people around you? Because during that time that you were playing, there was segregation and there was lots of racism. And so, how did you travel? And he said, well, we did that by bus. And so I said, well, that's good, but what else happened? And he started to explain some of the things that were going on. And I was like mesmerized. These are the kinds of things that we talk about with the MGC in terms of helping people with storytelling and being able to work on some of those issues. Music and dance therapy is another solution that we've come to find has been very beneficial in helping younger and older people avoid social isolation. We're doing that in places around the District of Columbia. We are also doing it in the metropolitan Washington area, and Maryland and suburban Maryland, and in Northern Virginia as well, primarily in Montgomery and Prince George's counties, in Maryland, and in the District of Columbia. And so we've been able to do that by being able to work with youth. By this, I mean we have an internship program that we work with seniors in high school. We also work with undergraduate students here at Howard University, and with graduate students as well, in terms of building on some of our research paradigms and what we are working on. And some of that is working on group arts and group interventions related to that. We have a drum circle program that we think is extremely important. 100-round drum circle is a program that was initially designed by a gentleman, a young man by the name of Kai Fields. And he developed the program to be able to show how people can be able to come together to address intergenerational issues. And the drumming is really the backdrop for what gets people connected with their roots. Historically, we talk about our African roots as people of color, and we talk about what it means to be of African ancestry, and to talk about the diaspora and what that means. And playing the drums is a way of getting people in tune to playing the same way, so that they're together, and those things together then help people to understand what it means to be able to talk to people about things that are important to them. And we found that to be particularly helpful with young people who may be dealing with everything from bullying to drug issues, to issues related to family dynamics, or just feeling left out, that they don't feel that they're part of the community. So we've been able to work on those pieces as well. We've also been able to work in the area of students working on some research related to vitamin D supplementation. Now, we know from the U.S. Preventive Services Task Force that that's the national body that comes together with experts in primary care who come together from around the country to be able to talk about recommendations for what physicians should do when they see their particular patients. And one of the things that they identified was many persons, from young people to adulthood and older adulthood, have a lack of vitamin D, which has dramatic impacts in longevity of their experiences. It has impact in terms of their quality of life. It has impact in terms of a variety of systems in the body, from endocrine systems to being able to have just a clearer understanding. And we say, as people of color, that we know a lot about this because we have this melanin in our skin, and therefore we're fine. But we found out during COVID-19 that if you didn't go outside, guess what? That vitamin D that was generated through sunlight didn't help people, because they weren't getting that sunlight by being outside. They were afraid to get out there. And so we think that there are now linkages that people can be able to look at that. We're also looking at understanding the links between gentrification and social isolation. And we have some undergraduate students that are working with us in terms of understanding how this works. And we have some of their research that they're building upon that we have that we're doing. The last of the pieces that I'll tell you about and why this is important as we talk about solutions is we are developing heat maps of particular geographic areas where people may be more at risk for social isolation. We've been able to look at some secondary data sets that are showing that people that have been admitted to the hospital for heart disease, or perhaps they've had a heart attack or stroke, or that they have been in an emergency or urgent care setting, that they have found that their geographic locations may in fact show that there are pockets where there are lots of people that may have some of the same needs as they relate to being potentially susceptible to social isolation. And it makes sense if you think about it, but we don't just want the anecdotal data. We want to have some specific evidence-based data that we can point to as we talk about the continued work of the Gerontology Center. So all of these are ways that we think are important to look at demonstrating through our research, through my research in particular, why this is important. And we are demonstrating these linkages with being able to bring older people and younger people together to promote strong connections and to encourage persons in ways to lessen the prevalence of social isolation. The solution sets that we talk about are very much related to this whole issue of what do we mean when we talk about research that makes a difference in people's lives. And we think that these intergenerational solutions can make a difference in people's lives. When we talk about grandparents raising grandchildren, the primary reason for why they are in that position of having to raise grandchildren there's not just one, there's actually three major reasons, and they have a lot to do with social isolation as well. One is that they have custody of the children or child because their grandchild because of issue related to drug or substance abuse on the part of the parent or parents. And so they are unable to get the type of support necessary to help them to be able to work on those things. A second area that we look at are what do we mean when we talk about these issues affecting people because they have had a parent or parents die. Sometimes that's related to domestic violence. Sometimes that's related to ways in which we are unable to talk with one another. And so the parent is absent and has died perhaps in gun violence or other kinds of things where they're involved with things that are not viewed as positive for families or for raising children. And so the grandparent steps in and is able to do it. And the other reason that often happens that people don't talk about very often is directly related to the thing that most folks think are good reasons, but that's because the parent has just abdicated their responsibility. And so the family is unable because of dysfunction or because of lack of resources, et cetera. And the grandparent steps in to avoid the child having to go into the foster care system. And so they are able to do that. And so we've been doing a lot of work with the MGC to try and help people to address some of these issues. But we recognize that no one of these issues is providing the solution to what we are talking about in terms of ways in which these experiences are shared. We're talking about major ways in which people have come together and ways in which students are learning levels of research that they may want to continue to build upon. as they look at going to undergraduate or graduate schools and working out in the community. And so we know that we are stronger together than apart. And so we continue to build on ways in which we were able to do those things. So something I ask you to think about. Yes, one, you can be lonely, even if you're surrounded by other people, because the person you may want to be with, you're not able to. The second is you can live alone, as I referenced earlier, and not feel lonely or socially isolated at all, because you might have the ability to interact with people. And so you can take being around people in doses, so that you know that I don't care to be out there talking to people at this point in time, but I am going to go to a concert and interact with people, or I'm going to go to dinner with friends and we're going to be able to talk and interact, or I'm going to be able to go and visit family members, et cetera, et cetera. And so ask you to think about those things, about the differences between the two. Some of the macro context related to social isolation. So social isolation in terms of a macro, micro perspective, it's really a micro level consequence to what is happening at macro level. There are social forces, as I mentioned, related to racism. I mentioned the issue related to homophobia, maybe even xenophobia or sexism or classism, and many, many more. And we see that these things are systematic and they're system-wide. And so because of those things, those contexts, social isolation, they can mean a lot. So I gave you that information related to, can it be social exclusion that leads to social isolation? And the answer is yes, it can. And so you can be excluded, as we're talking about, from it because of all these things that we talked about, the macro context related to social isolation, and it can affect folks in either of these two experiences. Just a picture of some folks that are struggling with these issues. And we recognize that people need folks to reach out to try and notice. It's when people fall through the cracks that, oh, don't go and see Robert. He's feeling down, and let's leave him alone. He'll come out of it on his own. Well, maybe that's true, and maybe it's not true. How do we do that? And what are the ways in which we encourage others to be able to work through some of those issues? We always talk about the need for supports in terms of social workers, psychologists, psychiatrists, counseling therapists, people that can provide that level of therapy necessary to help you to feel better are always going to be well respected and appreciated, even if the person that needs that help doesn't see that immediately. So the signs and symptoms, we want to make sure that the person at risk, that just because they want to be alone doesn't mean they should be. Those that disengage from family and friends that used to be very much interested in engaging with family and friends. Those that don't want to venture outside or interact with people, we talked about that. Or those that have been traumatized, as I mentioned, with PTSD, or they may have PTSD related to family interactions, community interactions, maybe the loss of a job in a particular way that humiliated someone. And maybe for all of these reasons and others, they're unable to cope. And when you're unable to cope, you may react differently than you might have if you were otherwise in the situation. Just some of the pieces that lead to this inability to cope. We talk about trauma. We talk about anxiety and depression affecting individuals. People that are irritable, they don't trust others. They act out behaviors, including self-medication, gun violence. Those are things that happen in communities that are related to the individual, but the cumulative impact is that the community becomes sick as well as the person. And so these are all related to stress that can be both positive stress in terms of moving ahead to change the way things are, or they can be negative, in which case people are looking at physical and emotional responses that affect your mental health. So I want you to think about these pictures. Think about that happening to other folks, older, younger, people that are thinking that they have all their things together, their act together, they know what they're doing, but they may also have some difficulties. Yes, social isolation is related to depression. Yes, depression is a mood disorder related to sadness, loss of interest, etc. But those are things that we need to think about as we're talking about ways to help people. So we know that the DSM manual, what it says is low mood related to the depression, but that depression and social isolation go hand in hand. They do have an impact on daily life experiences, and so they can be very important. Trauma, I mentioned, the emotional wounds related to it. And so as I summarize the last of the things we're talking about, we talk about different types of trauma. I'm not going to go into all of those, but we recognize that it can be the impending divorce, or the fact that I wanted to tell a family member I loved them and never did. And now these things are troubling me and I can't deal with them. That's where we talk about the importance of being able to address your spirituality and to go to places where you can look at meditation, you can look at being able to address prayer, to talk about that. That works for some, it may not work for others. But we recognize with social isolation, there are a variety of things that we need to think about that we can work with to help others. Yes, it can have impact on the community. As I was mentioning, the psychic and physical losses are important, but it also is something that we know that is also related to whether people can afford the care that they may need. So I mentioned therapy earlier, but therapy is typically not free. Somebody pays for it, whether it's Medicaid or Medicare, or private insurance or private pay. Someone is providing those services. And so there's also, as I mentioned, the right to self-determination. Not everyone chooses to want to address their particular issue. And they may say, as I said earlier, I'm fine, bruh, I don't need no help. Just you go do your thing, I'm going to do mine. And we recognize that disengagement can mean that they might become more socially isolated. And these things can leave scars on the individual and on the community. And so you want to make sure when we talk about these things that the costs associated with that can be quite significant. And so I ask you to think about this issue. We have solutions to be able to help community. We have solutions to be able to help individuals, but we recognize that the cost for not helping can be significant to the community in terms of neuroses, potential psychoses that can develop as a result of that. And that we know that these are a lot more expensive when people have to go to the hospital. And we talked about $1 billion a year in 2013, and we're talking about over 406 billion last year in 2024. And so this is a cost to communities that we need to think about. And it means that just because you can't afford to pay doesn't mean that it's not going to be there. Thank you very much for listening, and hopefully I stimulated you in terms of thinking about not just what is social isolation and how it impacts others, the seriousness of it, but I also talked about what that means for you in the community and what you potentially can do to help, both in terms of a research perspective, but in terms of living your life or recognizing that the life you save may be yours, and it may be somebody that's close to you, and it may just be somebody that you see, but you took the time to inquire how they're doing and perhaps looking at getting them involved in programs that might be of assistance to them so they can get the help they particularly need. I'm ready now to answer any questions you might have or to be able to address some of your concerns. We have a number of people that may have some interest in wanting to know a little more about what's going on. I ask you to offer those questions now, and I'll be glad to try and answer them if you have. Any questions? Okay, you see on here, blackdoctors.org, there's a Qualtrics form that we ask you to be able to look at, and we ask that you be able to provide that information, and that if you have any thoughts before we end today, I hope that you will share those. If not, I want you to know that it's been my pleasure to be able to speak with you. Don't forget the survey link that you need to have and recognize. That's the Qualtrics form, and that you're able to put that up, and our technical person, Miss Asia Bailey, will be able to post that information for folks. If there is any additional thought that you may have, want to be able to make sure that you are clear that social isolation is a very serious issue in our communities, but it is not something that is overpowering, particularly if you have solutions and you have ways in which we can work collaboratively to address it. As again, I mentioned, the Qualtrics information, please take the time to complete that document. It's going to be helpful to us as we are able to look at the next steps, and they will be ways in which we can work collaboratively to address those issues. We here at the Multidisciplinary Gerontology Center thank you for listening to some of the things that we are doing and working on it. At the School of Social Work, I work with some other faculty to be able to work on issues related to aging, related to social isolation. People like Dr. Sandra Crew, people like at the College of Medicine, Dr. Miriam Michael, a number of folks related. Our team of folks work. We have Miss Vera Fields, who serves as our outreach coordinator for the Gerontology Center and working, and we have a great group of students that are interacting and working with us to work on this research. So take the time, please, to complete that form for us. It's how we know how things are going and how we can get better. We do know that this particular program is provided for your use. You can go to the blackdoctors.org website and be able to look at this information as well. But we do much better when we can understand what has worked well and why it works. Thank you again for taking the time to listen with me, and look forward to next time. Dr. Robert Cosby at the Howard University School of Social Work, our Multidisciplinary Gerontology Center. Thank you for being with us today.